A lot of people say that 4-cost flex in TFT is currently dead in set 9.5. Is that really true? Well, leave it to China once again to show us the way. In CN, currently, Bruiser Flex is a very popular way to flex around 4-cost, utilizing a 0 plus a secondary carry, so that way you can withstand the big burst from a lot of meta comps. Former regionals champion AChen is going to show you how he flexes around his game plan using a mix of good item holders and show you that 4-cost flex is still on the menu. We're hopping on board with AChen's POV from China. AChen is a top challenger player who won the very first China regionals back in 2020 and has since top forward and done well in a lot of other tournaments. He's also considered a really good looking, handsome guy and is often the ladies' man of CNTFT, whatever that means. He's currently playing Earth on Ecliptic Vaults, the portal that gives you a bunch of gold every time you pick an augment, and he's open to playing all kinds of different lines depending on what direction he gets from his ancient archives. So what's going to be really important to focus on stage 1 is what units he's holding and how he's going to be playing the round before his augment. Because as the rules with Earth goes, based on your round previously of what you put on your board, those are the traits that you can possibly get tailored for your tome. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, you can check out my Earth guide previously where I talk about tailoring your board 1 round before your augment or 1 round before you pop your tome. 6, 8, 10, and 12 are the biggest breakpoints that you're trying to aim for, so that way you can get 1, 2, 3, 4 tailored tomes, depending on your traits on the left-hand side of your screen. Let's go ahead and pause and talk about what he's choosing to tailor for at 1-4. Right now, he has 6 inactive traits with Bastion, Vanquisher, Bruiser, Bilgewater, Ionia, and Void. And I think about 4 of these he's happy with, which is Bruiser, Bilgewater, Ionia, and Void. Vanquishers and Bastions are a little bit on the weaker side currently in the metagame, but you still can play around them. He has a Kale currently on bench. I think he wants to play this Kale because ultimately both of their traits are going to be really good. Demacia +1 is really powerful for that vertical you can play for Earth. And then Slayer is also a very underrated trait that is another powerful vertical that you can play for if you can get 6 Slayer online. And so I would recommend playing this Kale here, which I think he is leaning towards. And I think these are the 6 traits we're happy with. He doesn't end up playing Cassiopeia because I think one of her traits is a little bit on the weaker side, which is Invoker. But the good news is that he can pretty much just make these 2-stars and play around whatever emblem he hits around first. We pause here on the augment screen. I'm pretty sure he's going to pick things like Earth no matter what, because this is the whole reason why you play this legend, so you can pop that tome and get strong direction. I still think it's good practice to reroll the 2nd and 3rd augment currently, because you still might get something that's so good that you can't really skip. You're talking about things like Perfected Repetition or something that gives you such strong direction that you can't really ignore it. So he rolls and sees Magic, Crest, and Juggernaut, which is not good enough. And now we're looking at his early game tome options, which honestly, you could pick 3 of these 4. So the first option is always going to be what is on your board. So in this case, he hit Bruiser. And so his random options are Void, Bilgewater, and Ishtal. And funny enough, he has that Void with Cho'Gath already, so he can justify taking it. The problem with Void is that he doesn't actually have a 3rd Void unit right now. And so he actually would be at the mercy of his shops. And if he gets that +1 Void, while he could commit the Void reroll because he has things like this tier that he could play off of, he doesn't actually have that tempo that he wants early on. Bilgewater, for the same reason, is a lot weaker. Had he held on to things like the Alawi and whatnot, he could justify playing that Bilge. So I think right now, the only thing that makes sense is Bruiser at the moment. And that's okay because Bruiser ends up being one of the most flexible traits that you can play around currently in the game. Bruiser is just a good frontline because 6 Bruiser right now is currently just overstated in 9.5 and is generically really good. Who doesn't want a lot of HP in their composition to help their frontline? Pretty much every single composition could use it. And so that's why right now he's going to play around a very flex opening and look at it, even leveling to play the Neferi to link in the Challenger, the Shurima, and this Irelia too. Very, very nicely done. Pretty high roll opener, all things considered, because he did end up finding a way to utilize all those 2-star units. But this goes to show you the importance of playing around those early game units that you can hold. A lot of times when you're playing things like Earth, you struggle to put together a really good board. So try to play around those pairs. If you end up holding 1 of every kind of unit when you're playing Earth because you're hoping that whatever direction you get with the tome, you can link into traits immediately, you forget the most fundamental concept of stage 2, which is play a strong upgraded board so that way you can tempo whatever round you hit. Man, so that was a lot to cover. We didn't even talk about his first early slam. Right now, it looks like the most powerful offensive component that he can play around is Tier. He could have gone for Adaptive Helm and maybe slammed Adaptive Helm on the front line, but then he'd be stuck playing around Vest, and then that means he has to make another frontline oriented item, unless he wants to go for something like Night Harvester. So the only other item that you could really get in that spot that would make sense if he slammed Adaptive Helm would be Sunfire Cape. That means that he has all items for his front line and nothing for his back line. And so he wants to bring balance to his items. And that actually makes sense as well for Protector's Vow, because if you slam Protector's Vow, that means he has an open cloak. What do you want to play off of that cloak? Maybe Ionic Spark or something else similar to that. Dragon's Claw, potentially, because there's a lot of multicasters in the meta. That doesn't sound very good. So for the sake of balance, he slams the Stoneplate Gargoyle, and now is going to play around that tier. And this brings us to an important concept in general when you're playing around these item situations is try to play around your best component that makes sense for your line. In this case, he knows that tier is very flexible because you can make blue buff, you can make Shiv, he can still even just make another Adaptive Helm like we talked about at the very beginning and go for another cloak. And so he has versatility of his options. I mean, there's even other things that he could do, like grab this rod, for example, and go for Archangel Staff. It's all possible. In general, this is a really strong way to play TFT because he had so many options and he knows he's going to be likely last pick because he was streaking so much in the early game. Hits 4 Bruiser, very good setup, and now even has that link to Shurima back with Renekton. He's not going to just immediately replace this Irelia 2 and put this on another Bruiser unit. He just wants to play around those upgraded units instead. All right, AChen is choosing not to sell his Irelia 2. That's something that he could have thought about if he wanted to maximize his gold. You could, for example, play the Stoneplate onto the Cho'Gath 2, play in a unit like Soraka, and because you have that Irelia off the board, you can sell her and make that 20 gold guaranteed. This is a pretty difficult fight. It looks like that Cassio is actually going unchecked, but he should be okay. Assuming that he's able to do it. Oh no, OT is about to kick in. So he loses in overtime. That's actually kind of a disaster because he played his strongest board and didn't make 20 and now no longer has a streak. So that's a trade-off that ended up not paying off, which is something that might end up being a point of regret. I thought his board was strong enough to streak because he has upgraded Irelia 2 and Cho'Gath and Cassio. Also, this is a punish for not slamming that Archangels as well. So this is something that I think he has to reconcile with, which is I think he probably got a little bit too lax in terms of thinking about how strong his board is. But that's a little bit unlucky that I went to overtime. That's okay. Those kinds of accidents happen, but you can tell the smallest amount of differences could have swung things, which is things like slam that Archangels, or heck, even putting something like Rod on Irelia could have potentially made the diff. All things considering, he's still in a pretty good spot, and now he's just gonna probably commit to flexing around whatever he can hit for that mid game because he's not gonna be re-rolling Cho'Gath or anything like that. Another reason why he didn't want to sell this Irelia and put the item on Cho'Gath is because ultimately he wants to put this Stoneplate onto a better bruiser than Cho'Gath in the late game. If you put this item onto a 2-star Cho, you have to replace him later. So 1, you have to find 3 more Chos, which gets increasingly more difficult as you level up because the rarity gets harder to find that unit. And then 2, you lose all the stacks that you have on that Cho'Gath through that feast. Remember, every time he kills a unit with his ability, he gains a little bit of extra max HP. And that's just going to be harder to get and replicate if you end up selling that unit. So all things considered, I understand why he didn't sell this Irelia and move the items to a 2-star bruiser. But I will say that losing that streak is a trade-off that he's probably gonna have to think about a lot. AChen is not leveling the 6 here. He did over level previously in stage 2 to try to keep up his tempo. I was busy explaining a lot of his early game setup, so didn't actually cover that, which is fine as long as he was making gold and is able to streak. And ultimately, because he's playing on a portal that gives him a lot of gold, like Ecliptic Vaults, which gives you gold every time you pick that augment, that's okay. All things considering, he's still very, very strong. All right, I'm pausing here on his 3-2 augment. We got the big grab bag, which gives him a bunch of components and gold, as well as that duplicator. He doesn't really have many units that he can use that duplicator on right now, so he'd be holding onto that duplicator. And ultimately, he's going to be wanting to play around 4-cost flex with bruisers because there's a handful of 4-cost that you can play in the backline. So he's going to be mainly angling around Azir, and that champion duplicator is not going to be important. Cybernetic Bulk is really interesting to me. 1, we already picked an item with the bruiser emblem off the ancient archives, meaning that we're going to likely spread out some components and make that HP really good. And then bruiser scales off of the current max HP, so you could really justify taking things like Cybernetic Bulk and making those bruisers even tankier. Hedge Fund is also a little bit on the fence. Hedge Fund is usually like a default pick if you don't really have many good options and you just want to start econing up. But because he has a good backup, I think I'm just going to reroll that first augment and reevaluate. If he wants to roll the third augment too, Hedge Fund, because he doesn't like it, he can also choose to do that too. I think that Cybernetic Bulk is also a good fallback option. So he rerolls and finds Cursed Crown. Cursed Crown is usually good if you are playing for like a deep vertical, going for something like 9 Shurima, 9 Ionia, 9 Demacia. In this case, I don't think Cursed Crown is strong enough. Plus, he doesn't have units to play immediately, so I don't think it's Cursed Crown. The other thing is Buried Treasure 3, which I think is okay to pick, but the only thing that I don't like about Buried Treasures is that you get your Prismatic almost an entire stage later. And Buried Treasures is more about opening up your options in terms of items. And I think in this spot, he doesn't have any components that he hasn't slammed. I think he has 0 components. And so unless he's actually rolling exactly the first 2 components that he really wants to, say like an anti-heal item like Sunfire Cape or Morello, or some other really good defensive item like Redemption, unless those exact 2 items roll back to back, he's not going to get his first completed item till likely after the stage 3 carousel. So I think he's thinking really about Cybernetic Bulk here. I think that's the strongest pick based off these 3 options. He chooses to roll for it anyways and gets Blinding Speed. Blinding Speed is really interesting because 1, it's kind of like Buried Treasures, except you get 2 completed items up front and you get an extra component. And Buried Treasures gives you 6 components delayed over an entire stage. Blinding Speed seems superior to Buried Treasures right now. Not to mention that you have Shiv. So if you have Shiv, that scales with attack speed. That Rage Blade can go immediately on that Cassiopeia. Then you don't have someone that holds RFC, so it's a little bit awkward. That being said, that's fine. You could just totally place it on, I don't know, like Irelia in the meantime. And then you eventually can transition to a dual carry. You can have units like Multicaster and Neela use that RFC, and now you can dual carry with the Bruiser frontline. So I really like Blinding Speed the most, the more I think about it. And it looks like he agrees, because now he actually has really good tempo, and he's strong now, which is really important. Oh, this is a slight mistake in my opinion. He was stuck thinking so much he actually didn't level. Ha! He didn't get punished though. He queued up into a level 5 player who's trying to lose streak with Hedge Fund. So kind of lucky actually. This goes to another important concept. Make your augment decisions quicker so you can actually react to it, so you avoid getting in situations like this. I usually set a hard time limit for myself. I say, for example, I need to pick an augment with at least 10 to 12 seconds left so I can make a decision on leveling if I need to roll. Thankfully, he did not get punished, though, and he levels right here off curve because he forgot to do it and ends up being a pretty good spot. So we end up putting the RFC on Irelia. This is actually really good because it's better to be on a unit than to just be on your bench. If it's on your bench, it's literally not doing anything. And while it's not a great item on Irelia, having her be at least, 5 to 10% stronger through having a secondary item is better than having it on your bench. Had he waited, though, or maybe he had leveled, he could put RFC on, say, a backliner like Malzahar or eventually Vel'Koz, and that would have been a better use of it. That's okay. Even the best are still doing small mistakes here and there and can optimize. That's what makes TFT a really interesting game, because even at the highest level, despite the variance, there's still so much small optimization that you could be doing that could be influencing your game. I'm actually really surprised that he's not thinking about holding Sona in this spot. Sona is actually a really good complement specifically to the attack speed build that he has. He could actually play Sona and then put it between the Vel'Koz and the Cassiopeia, get the Multicaster in. And everyone knows that Multicaster right now, this patch is insanely strong. It's also a good splash trait. And that's the whole point of why they rework Sona, so that way she can be more versatile splash. So I think that's another small optimization that could end up being relevant, but not that important. He got last pick Bow, so now he has 2 RFCs. Oh, he wants to transition to Kaisa. You can go for RFC, Bruiser, Kaisa, and then play the Stone Plate on someone else. Interesting spot as well, where he puts the Void Remora back in the 3rd row because he wants to get max value on the Stone Plate. Probably a little too greedy for my taste. I think I would probably also put the Void Remora on the front line, because it's not like I want this Void Remora to live for very long, because I'd rather have a champion be the one that lives and the Void Remora dies. I would personally have the Void Remora in the front line, but that's just a small preference thing. And overall, he's still getting results, which is really good. I think the logic is that he just wants max value off the Stone Plate, because Stone Plate gets worse over time. Because the way the game scales, everyone's getting so much stronger exponentially with their boards and damage that Stone Plate is not actually as reliable, and you can't really solo frontline as easily in the late stage of the game. Plus, Bruisers want to be like a front row anyway, so he's trying to maximize value right now. I personally think that you still probably want to put the Void Remora in the front line though, because I rather have the Void Remora die and the Irelia live a little bit longer than the other way around. Double Stone Plate Vanquishers, so a lot of Stone Plates currently going up against an Ionia player as well, so he knows that Neela might be on the more contested side, unless his opponent wants to reroll Ashe, which is also viable. Winning this fight's really, really big for his streak, and looks like he's able to get there. And that's thanks to a good combination of playing around, his cheap units, which are Cassio 2, Irelia 2, and Cho 2, and also just making sure that he's itemizing very intelligently. And so now we're at the point where we have to debate if we want to roll at 7 or if we want to roll at 8 in greed here. He rolls a little bit during the creep round, which is really good. He has excess gold of 50. Why not just roll right here and right now? He spikes a Cassante, by the way, and gets Bruiser on Cassante, which is actually one of the best emblem holders of Bruisers, period, because it gives him enough tankiness, plus that Shurima link, so that way he can get 4 Shurima in just like this, if he wants to, and then have that ability for Cassante to do a lot of damage through kicking and executing units with that one-shot kill. So he gets that 4 Shurima at the moment. Stoneplate could go on Cassante. Usually you want to put resistances on Sejuani or Scion as your bruiser, but in this case, this is the best unit that he can put his Stoneplate on because every other unit is way weaker to hold resistances. Again, you don't really want to put items onto things like that Cho'Gath too. So it looks like all of his secondary carry options are covered at the moment. He's playing these items on Kai'Sa temporarily, but it looks like Neela and Mordekaiser is going to be contested for his 4 cost. So he's going to have to be pretty open-ended. Ooh, let's take a look at his 4-2 augment, and he has Recombobulator, which, as fun as it is, I don't think that's the pick. Mostly because all the units on his board already are really good. He wants to play around that bruiser, so if he recombobs all of his bruisers, he loses that bruiser synergy. He could theoretically place the non-bruiser units on the board. One quick tip about Recombobulator is you can bench all the units that you want to keep and put on the board all the units you want to recombob. So you could theoretically recombob like 2 or 3 units. That seems like low value relative to what you could be getting. Armistice is definitely the best augment right now for him to consider, but I want to see the other options. So I'm down to re-roll the grab bag as well as the recombobulator. Grab bag is if he wants more options for items, but he already has so many items, so I don't know if he actually needs that at the moment. Plus, I think he wants a little bit extra combat strength. Okay, so he rerolls and then he finds Social Distancing 1. Social Distancing 1 is a lot weaker than it used to be. It got nerfed, and if you're gonna be doing like 10% more, I think this Omnivamp from Armistice is just straight up better because it helps keep that Azir in the fight for a long time. Not to mention you're playing things like Rageblade, so you do eventually have this ability where Armistice gives enough healing to ramp with that Rageblade and other forms of attack speed, which can be really, really powerful. Ooh, Cybernetic Bulk. So he actually can go Cybernetic Bulk for the same reasons we talked before, but I think Armistice is still a little bit better because it helps amplify his carries, and Cybernetic Bulk amplifies his front line. So I think in this spot, I think I'd rather play around Armistice, which is a lot better than most other silver augments that he can get at the moment. Plus, Armistice is much more of a late game augment anyways because it scales off of the percentage damage that you're dealing. And late game, you're going to be dealing way more damage in early game. So I think now's the time to pick for it. Once again, level's a little bit too slow, and this is the opportunity to play the Sejuani. So he actually could have gone for 6 Bruiser this turn. So this is, again, another thing about being a little bit too slow, but that's okay. If he wins this fight, it ends up being all good. Oh, why do I feel like we're not winning this fight? Oh, man. 6 Bruiser would have been really, really nice. Oh, well, looks like we're able to get it done, and OT kicks in. So no harm, no foul. Once more, barely getting his augment choice in time, but missing a stronger variation of the board. Because I think 6 Bruiser has to be better here. The only issue is he doesn't have a better unit to hold this RFC IE. And I think it has to be Neela. When he slams Infinity Edge, that's purely for AD focused build. And while they did fix the crit on Mordekaiser, it was bugged in the previous patch. This has to be better on Neela. And so he rolls to 0, finds Neela pair. And now he's caught a little bit indecisive because he's trying to figure out what's the best variation of the board. He wants to play around the Shurima because he has that early Cassante, but he also wants to play around 6 Bruiser, and he can't fit it all while having Neela on the board. The only way they can have Neela on the board is if you gave her that Bruiser emblem, and then you play the 4 Shurima another way, but then what do we do with this Infinity Edge? So AChen's kind of stuck in an awkward spot. He's also still holding Mordekaiser because I think if he hits Mordekaiser 2, he's still willing to play Mordekaiser. And so he's keeping his options open. This brings us to another important concept. Gold is less important in the late stage of the game. Hold your pairs so that you can upgrade and spike in power. And so it's rather important for him to secure that 2 stars and lock in that top 2, top 3, top 4 position first before he chooses to move up. He needs defensive items, but it looks like all offensive components again. Somehow he gets more bows. Holy crap, this is like the equivalent of like his 7th bow or something. 2 RFCs, Shiv, and Rageblade. Rolls to 0, finds Azir 2, gives up on Mordekaiser, which I think is smart. I'm actually really interested again that he's choosing not to play around the 6 Bruiser. Most people would be rushing for 6 Bruiser at this point. They'd rather just play 3 Shurima because quite honestly, ascending things like Talia and Renekton 2 is not that important. The benefit of 4 Shurima is that all your Shurimas ascend, so that way they get, you know, that maximum HP and the attack speed bonus. It really only matters on 2 units right now. And even then, it's not like Cassante is going to be a deal breaker if you don't have it. And so this could have been a fight that was a 6 bruiser diff. He's not choosing to go for it. He actually sold his Vi pair. Would have been Vi 2 as well. And so now it looks like he's finally coming to terms with, okay, I probably need to get 6 bruiser in. There could be another thing that he's thinking about, which is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. He was streaking at 90 HP and said, hey, I'm going to just keep playing this until I lose. Prove to me that my board isn't good enough and I need to switch things around. I think a lot of times people are a little bit too quick to switch their board and say like, hey, like I hit the important trait that I'm trying to play around. Let me go ahead and switch it when whatever you're playing right now works. I mean, funny enough, looks like he lost twice. So he played a 4 bruiser, 4 streamer variation that lost. He played a 6 bruiser variation that lost. And while he does have Cassante pair, Jarvan 2 ultimately is better than a 1-star Cassante. Plus, he gets the strategist in, so he gets a little bit extra AP and damage. Really wants more frontline items, though. No anti-heal, no redemption, which can scale up that HP. No resistances. Right now, rolling for Nila 2. We hit it, so we did end up getting contested, but we end up hitting it anyways. And thanks to our HP lead, we should be in a really good spot for top 4. Pops the anvil, and now he's to figure out his itemization. Oh god, this is really awkward because, again, he got more offensive items. In the end, I think he got really unlucky with his items because this is just generally not very good. In these kinds of spots, you have to think about what are some hybrid items you can play around. Another way to think about is what is a good item I can make right now and then play around that with an item that I have on my anvil. So in this case, the first item that I see that could be used for a frontline unit is Bloodthirster. Bloodthirster gives you a shield based off your max HP, and guess what? Bruiser is a lot of HP, so in the end, the Bloodthirster helps. So with that, we have a glove and a bow. Oh man, it's times like this I really wish that we had Shroud back, because then it'd be BT plus Shroud and you just float the bow. But you can go for this vest because it's the only defensive component, and you can go for Titans, which actually is a really good combination. If you guys know, in a lot of other bruiser builds or attack fighter builds, you can play for BT Titans and ends up being quite solid. So I think Bloodthirster Titans makes the most sense here. There's another element of what AChen can think about, which is he's very far ahead. He's at 80 HP, and maybe he can start thinking about level 9 and playing around BIS items. The best item setup that he could play for Nila is Rapid Fire Cannon plus a Giant Slayer, and he has that GS already. And he can take a tier and make Adaptive Helm, which is also BIS Jarvan, because the more he gets targeted, the more he's going to be likely to cast again. And so he could actually just say, hey, this Infinity Edge, maybe I'll put it on a late game unit, maybe like an Aatrox or, you know, whoever else, like Gangplank, whatever, and then just go for 2 good items. And so those are the 2 things that you can make. You can make 2 decent items, or you can go for 2 BIS items, lose 1 item, but because he's so far ahead, he can play for it later game. So it looks like he's thinking about this tier because Adaptive Helm is really good. I also would like Giant Slayer to be made, but... oh, interesting. He's going for Infinity Edge instead. Okay, I personally think that Giant Slayer would have been better straight up on Nila, but he wants to save the Remover, and Remover does have some powerful options, but these are all just options and choices, which is what makes itemization really, really interesting in TFT. It's not like Rek'Sai is particularly really good either, but at least you can use these items and throw random items to just contribute to the team. Usually you only itemize Rek'Sai and Bruisers if you have augments like Titanic Strength, but again, in this spot, you just play whatever you can get. Going up against a Multicaster Noxus build, he is very strong right now, and now he's clear to go to 9. Probably could consider selling units to get to 20 gold like Cassante at this point. And now it's just lights out and blitzing to 9 as fast as we can while still having gold. Another thing to consider is what he's going to hold on his way to 9. For example, a question is, does he hold extra Rek'Sais in his shop? That does come at the cost of econ, but one thing that people don't talk about is that the odds for 3 costs are still really high at level 9. It's just they take away the odds of 1s and 2 costs and they put it all in the 5 cost. And so you have a pretty decent chance of hitting Rek'Sai 3. And if he chooses to go for it, he does have items on this Rek'Sai, so maybe he wants to just incidentally hit 6 Bruiser, Rek'Sai 3, and go slower to 9. He scouts and he sees 9 Noxus, so he actually just beat a 9 Noxus board, which is kind of insane to think about. Also, because it's 9 Noxus, that makes me want Giant Slayer even more, because Noxus has so much HP on the trait Sunfire is probably the best pick here because he has no anti-heal. We talked about how utility is really important. Things like shred and things like anti-heal is really, really important so that people can't sustain themselves. Oh, another Azir shows up in the shop. I'm wondering if he's thinking about 3 stars and rolling at 8 instead of going to 9. Because now he's holding on to a lot of things. He's holding on to extra Rek'Sai. He's holding on to Azir. He's still holding Sedge and Viper. And so when you have so much committed to the bench, it's going to be hard to actually get to 9 because in reality, he could almost be at 50 gold if he just sold everything. Obviously, that's not going to happen because he still has some important pairs. But this is how you start navigating in your mind whether or not you go to 9 versus stay at 8 and consider rolling for 3 stars. Going up against a Demacia board, but they only have more than 1. So this is a pretty easy win. And this is why 6 Booster is good. It's just stat checking everybody who is not online and hitting their 2-star 4 cost or their 3 stars that they're re-rolling for. Hey, Vi 2 is good. Heimerdinger is interesting, but it's a little bit late because Heimerdinger's best use case is for the Mechanoswarm for anti-heal and then the Shrink for the reduction of resistances. The best part about Heimerdinger would be to actually just give him the items on Nilo, which is really funny, but I don't think Heimerdinger is necessary. Plus, that would require us to roll a lot of gold right now, and we're trying to build up our resource to think about going to 9 or rolling on 8. He's really scouting a lot as well to see what people are rolling for, because another element to think about is not only are you going to roll at 8 to get 3-star, but you also roll at 8 to potentially deny what other people are chasing. At this point, AChen has recognized that he's very clearly top 4. How can he top 2 and win the game from here? It's really helpful in your mind to start setting objectives of, okay, I'm going to lock in top 4. How can I play for top 2? Okay, I locked in top 2. How do I play for top 1? In this case, denying your opponent's win condition can sometimes be just as good as chasing your own. Oh, another Rek'Sai 2. So I guess at this point, we're going to be rolling and itemizing Rek'Sai 3. Another Azir. So we're going to start rolling. Thieves Gloves is pretty interesting here, but looks like he just wants more frontline items for bruisers because, again, we don't really have that many. Holding on to extra Nilas as well. And now he's committed to a full-on roll down. He made a Nasus too, which is not particularly really important. In fact, I'm confused. Why did he did that? Probably to increase his forecast odds, or maybe to transition to Nasus over Jarvan, which would be kind of surprising. Nasus can actually hold bruiser pretty decently, but I think his setup with Jarvan 2 is totally fine as well. Okay, 1 player's dead, and now he's going to continue to roll. Aatrox is interesting to play around. Another Azir. So now he's chasing Nilo 3 and Azir 3, Rek'Sai 3. And he's going to give up on Rek'Sai because he doesn't want to overcommit on the gold count. Scouts and sees that the 9 Noxus player has 5 Mordekaisers. The opponent's also holding Azirs as well on the bench, as you can see. And so realistically, if his opponent's going to be holding on to things like the Azir and the Mordekaiser, it's going to be hard for him to hit Azir. He might actually be more likely to hit the Nilo 3, depending on how his opponent's roll down is going. Oh my gosh. He has 6 Sejuanis, 6 Azirs, 7 Nilas. And he hasn't actually found any Mordekaisers as well. So now it has turned into a complete game of denial. His opponent, by the way, has 3 Noxus emblems, which is crazy. I mean, that's what Tactician's Tool does. It's very, very good. And 9 Noxus is now online and way too strong. So how do we actually win now that we're going up against 9 Noxus and it seems to be crushing us? We've lost 2 fights pretty handily. Our opponent at level 9 has Scion 2. I guess at this point, we're just rolling for Nilo 3 or bust. Because we're probably not going to hit a Azir 3. And we hit Nila. Do we want Night Harvester on her? You know, I really don't think Infinity Edge is very good. And I kind of wish, again, we had Giant Slayer for this specific matchup. So a couple of itemization decisions are starting to bite us in the butt here. But Nila 3 should be good. His opponent has 6 Mordekaisers. So now the goal is shift a little bit. We have to deny that Mordekaiser 3. Oh, Jarvan didn't cast again. There's a little bit of positioning diffs that's happening here. Wait a second, 9 Noxus beats us anyways. Oh, that is not good. 2 Mordekaisers in the shop, by the way. What? His opponent also has 8 Mordekaisers? You're telling me that there were 4 Mordekaisers collectively in 2 shops when so many were gone. That's crazy. That means only 2 Mords are left in the pool. There's only 12 total. Okay, well, it doesn't really matter if we can't even win. He's repositioning because he wants more units to target this Jarvan so he gets max Adaptive Helm and Stoneplate synergy. So he can get as many casts on the Jarvan as possible. The crazy thing is, his opponent can still get stronger if they hit things like Aatrox too. All right, I think the positioning made the diff, potentially. Nope, never mind. We just lose. Well, that's kind of disparaged. The fact that our opponent is beating us without hitting Multicaster 3. At this point, we're losing to Multicaster 2, 9 Noxus. It does not seem like it is possible for us to win. I think this is also a product of just having like bad items. This Rek'Sai 2 with IE and Night Harvester. Imagine if they were resistance items of any kind to keep things like Sejuani 2 and your other bruisers alive. And at this point, I think we just roll for a Azir 3 and see if we can get it done. Oh, 7 Azirs. Sell Ashe. Oh, man. He doesn't want to sell his Mordekaisers, by the way, to roll for 0-3 because he still needs to deny, so he's kind of stuck holding these. That's Aatrox 2 with 3 items now. That's very, very scary. Neela is targeting the Aatrox and the Mordekaiser simultaneously, so positioning actually worked out really nice. Oh my gosh. Actually, we might win this fight. Oh, that's actually so close. Okay, if that can happen 2 more times, he wins the game. But maybe it really is just positioning diff then. There's hope. There's hope. So I think what ends up being the difference, now that we can take a second to break it down, is that he had Neela on the same side as the Mordekaiser. So she was attacking the frontline unit, but because of her AoE, it was actually hitting and trickling down the Mordekaiser as well. There's a possibility that we can still win this if we can get good positioning. That's a 3-star Mordekaiser. His opponent hit 3-star Mordekaiser anyways. Oh, now he's selling the board to see if he can hit a 0-3, but... yeah, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. He just surrenders. Mordekaiser 3 was going to be too much. GG's. So AChen shows you that Bruiser is one of the best front lines to currently flex around. Azir is one of your defaults, but your secondary carry can really flex around a lot of other units. He was playing Kai'Sa, open to Mordekaiser and Neela. And the crazy part is he had a lot of small optimizations and choices on how he wanted to outfit going to 9, playing around legendaries, or rolling at 8 for the 3-stars, as well as denying his opponent. So a lot of dynamics of how you play Bruiser Flex currently in the metagame. What do you guys think of AChen's play? Let me know in the comments below if I missed anything, or if you have any other suggestions and questions, and I'll respond. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.